President Moon Jae-in met with the heads of South Korea's top conglomerates today in a semi-informal meeting at the Blue House. The aim was to discuss how best to work together and is part of the president's New Year drive to tackle economic concerns that have grown increasingly over the past year. Now, to further explore the significance of this meeting, we have with us Professor Yang Jun-sok, a professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea, as well as our chief Blue House correspondent, Shin Se-min, to walk us through the president's thinking. It's good to have you both on the show today.
Great Happy to be here.
So let me start with you, Semin. So it's not every day that President Moon sits down with South Korea's biggest business leaders all in one room like this. I mean, how rare an occasion is this, and how significant is it?
I mean, this is no ordinary meeting between the president and the business leaders. And if you remember from the previous administration, because of what we had seen with the former, now jailed President Park Geun-hye, this Moon Jae-in administration had been keeping himself away from getting too close with the business executives. But today's meeting is the second of its kind after he had held one with the leaders of the businesses back in 2017. And another this year, which is with the small and mid-sized businesses and venture firms. And since the turn of the year, we had seen President Moon showing efforts to get the country's businesses more involved in working to get the business moved and to make some more real economic results this year. And as I've mentioned earlier, back in 2017, some 15 business executives and President Moon had met together for a cup of beer and talk about some of the economics that they are going into. And during that meeting, the president had also relayed the message of corporate reform, something that a lot of the business executives weren't so happy about.
So among the guest list that are attending today, I think the perhaps most significant is the Samsung chairman, Lee Jae-yong, and also there's some others as well, like Lotte, Shin Dong-bin. What's interesting is, though, both have been jailed and received suspended sentences over the various charges, such as bribery, embezzlement and corruption. However, what's notable as well is that other conglomerates who have similar kind of histories have not been invited, such as the Hanjin Group chairman, Cho Yang-ho, and the Buyong Group, Lee Jung-gun. How come they were invited and some others weren't invited today?
Now, the presidential office says the list of participants today had been recommended by the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry firsthand and then was finalized by the top office itself, given that the event is being held at the Blue House. And of those recommended includes leaders of representing different types of businesses and different of the regions as well. And as much as the focus is on the talks between the president and the leading business executives, the issue of who is in and who is not in on the list is also trending. And as you've mentioned, Chang-ho, if you look at the list of attendees, the leaders who have returned to running businesses after their probation or sentences have been suspended are on the list of attendees today, while those with confirmed or pending prison sentences have not been on the list. So that puts Samsung Electronics' Lee Jae-yong and Lotte's Shin Dong-bin on the list for the discussions today, along with other high-profile executives like the Hyundai Motor Group's Chung Ui-sun and LG chairman Koo Kwang-moon.
Professor Yang, I want to ask you first, what is your opinion of this guest list when you look at this people who are attending today?
Okay, well, there's a wide variety of people invited, perhaps too wide. You have large companies, you have small and medium-sized companies, you have venture companies, IT companies, traditional manufacturing companies. They all have similar items of interest, but they also have widely different items of interest. So I'm not quite sure whether this unwieldy size makes an effective meeting. But I think President Moon is genuinely interested in how the businesses feel. It's very often difficult to get what feel of what it's like on the ground when you're a government official, especially a high-level government official. So I think there's some genuine interest in trying to get a feel of what the businesses feel right now. But also, this administration has been burdened with a reputation for being anti-business. So much of the administration has been taken up with North Korean issues and then welfare issues such as minimum wage, 52-hour work week, and anti-monopoly issues and corporate governance issues that deals with also the political influence. So I think this administration does have a reputation for being anti-business, and they're trying to get around it, and I think this is one of their attempts.
Yes, so he's meeting with the conglomerate heads today, but last week he met with some of the smaller businesses as well. I mean, you're saying he's trying to get more face time with these kind of leaders to get better communication, but do you think it's an effective way for this to happen?
Well, I think it would have been much more effective if they had a beer type of meeting with smaller cadre of members. But I think this has as much a PR point of view as a practical policy point of view. They are interested in showing that this administration is not as anti-business as people think. And I think having so many business leaders here trying to express their point of view may be an effective PR way of doing changing people's opinions around, but I would really like to see this particular large meeting being reinforced by a series of smaller meetings. If the president cannot handle it, then maybe the prime minister and the high-level officials just having regular meetings with selected groups of corporate leaders in specific fields.
The format of today's meeting is also grabbing the attention as well, Semin. So the presidential Blue House is describing it as a town hall style meeting. And this, as you mentioned before, previously they also had in 2017 this kind of meeting with conglomerate heads where they had talked over some beers, as they say. But this is a very new style of, I think, talking with other leaders that this President Moon Jae-in has brought in. What is the thinking behind having this style of meeting, and how was the last meeting in 2017 seen in the public consensus?
I mean, to answer your second question, the general consensus of that beer meeting back in 2017 was viewed as a positive way in getting the talks going between the president and the business leaders. But the reason the meeting today is being held in a town hall setup is because the president had wanted this event to be more out of the formality, so that they have a frank discussions as to what they need from the government and what the president can provide to the business leaders moving forward. And this is the type that we've seen with in terms of meetings with SMEs and venture firms last week, as well as, I mean, even the reporters as well. So opening up the field for discussions, for open discussions, is, I think, one of the reasons behind that president and the Blue House had aimed for in the beginning. And the businesses had been trying to work under the Moon administration for the past 2 years now. So today's meeting, it may seem to work as a way to, help them fine-tune some of the necessities going further, especially with many of the economic indicators turning south in the past couple months that we've seen. And so no pre-selected questions and scenarios we know so far, and the participants and the government officials, including the president, will, I believe, will be speaking in a frank discussions with no restrictions.
Professor Yang, I want to go back to some of the guest list again as well. So we mentioned Samsung's de facto chief Lee Jae-yong, but I think that's very significant as well, because Samsung is South Korea's biggest conglomerate. 14% of South Korea's GDP is supposed to come from Samsung as well. I mean, what does it say that President Moon is so keen to meet Samsung's chief like this here in the setting? Okay,
well, I think the significance is, as you mentioned, Samsung is the largest conglomerate. Also, if you look at the last year's statistics, most of the economic statistics were fairly bad, except for exports and exports of semiconductors in particular, and obviously Samsung is the leader in semiconductor exports. So there's that significance there, just numbers. But also, if you look at people, young people who want to get a job, Samsung is one of the places where they really want to get into. Any type of changes in Samsung's policy, employment, exports, production, is going to be taken as a signal, I think, by other companies and other global players as well. So because Samsung is not only a big player in Korea, but also globally in a lot of industries, I think if the president can convince Samsung to change some of their direction, then it may be taken as a signal that Korea's economy is very hopeful and it has a bright future. But I think the sort of danger in that is that he doesn't want to push them too hard. Samsung also doesn't want to take advice blindly because, well, first of all, they have a lot of stockholders that they're responsible to, Samsung. And then there's this whole problem of how much influence should corporations have over the businesses, corporations should have over politics, and politics should have over businesses. That still hasn't been worked out yet. And Lee Jae-yong is especially going to be very sensitive to that. But I think that's because Samsung is so big that you cannot really ignore them.
You've gone over some of the points that President Moon Jae-in is perhaps concerned about. But Semin, more specifically as well, I mean, last week he gave this New Year's press conference where he really emphasized the economic issues that they want to tackle this year. I mean, what do you think, what's the message that he's going to be talking with these conglomerate heads today about?
I mean, you've mentioned President's New Year's address, and we already know that President Moon had said once and for all that he is standing by his income-led growth policy, which is something that he had been, anchoring since the turn of his administration. And although the president said he is willing to make necessary changes, whether it be the 52-hour week-long the working hours or the hike in minimum wages, that alone means that the trunk of the administration's economic policies won't change much at this point. Now, the experts I've talked to say, I'm not so sure if Professor Yang would agree to that, but they say that it just trickles down to who makes the first move, which means in order to get the corporates to start spending and make more investments and to keep the businesses more flowing and up the consumption, they want to know whether the administration is making the move of scaling back its regulations that it had first imposed at the turn of the year, or whether the businesses will be suggesting or coming up with more recommendations to start up the businesses going. But the country's big firms are looking to see if the Moon administration is willing to scale back the policies, whether it be the higher corporate tax rates and whatnot. And whereas the president is sticking to his vows to fight inequality and create jobs, is wanting the country's movers and shakers to make more investments as a means to boost the country's consumption.
Okay, well, I think the Moon administration is sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. They've put so much into some of the income-led policies, minimum wage, 52-hour work week, that I'm not sure if they're in a position to back off too much. I think this was shown at the beginning of the year when they tried to put concrete regulations in the 52-hour work week regulations when they said that they had to include paid holidays when they're calculating minimum wage, which a lot of businesses didn't like, and a lot of businesses argued that nobody really sought out their opinions. So I think at least in terms of minimum wage and 52-hour work week for this year, because they've already made these decisions, they're not in a political situation right now to walk it back. But I think the businesses will push for a lot of regulatory reform because, well, the government has signaled that they're open to it. They weren't necessarily open too much to it in 2017, but from about 2018 onwards, when they saw the economy was not doing well, and there was so much pressure from academia and business that Korea needs to raise its productivity, and one of the ways to do that is through regulatory reform, or regulatory innovation as they call it, that they needed to do something about it, so they passed laws on regulatory sandbox last year, and they're passing some laws on selected industries which allow more freedom from regulations, which will come in online this year. So I think the Chamber of Commerce, which is very interested in that area, will push for that. They may also push for not necessarily walking back on minimum wage and 52-hour work week for this year, but for future. They're talking about designing a new system to determine the minimum wage, and businesses obviously want to have more input into that. So maybe not minimum wage for this year, but for the future, I think that may be their goal.
Well, isn't President Moon Jae-in under an enormous amount of pressure to make more significant steps? Because, I mean, even the other day, there's the Korea Development Institute released a report saying the South Korean economy will continue to slow down, I mean, this year. I mean, it's facing the toughest time since the last financial crisis.
Looking at the Korean Development Institute report, I was hit really by, there's not really that many very good variables, optimistic variables this year. The government Ministry of Strategy and Economy's Green Book report had slightly fewer slightly more optimistic variables, but still, most of the variables are looking very bad for Korea right now. Consumption isn't growing very much. The number of jobs created was a lot less than government had hoped for. The international situation is getting worse, so Korean exports will probably be down this year. So there's a lot of concerns, and I think this is forcing the government to re-examine their economic policies more than they would have if the economy had been going better. But still, because they made some commitment to welfare policies and equality policies, that I think they're in a really hard position to back down.
Well, it's been a fascinating discussion, but we'll have to end it there. Semin, Professor Yang, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.